Hello, I'm Joe. You heard from me earlier. I lead the AI canvas at Miro. The team's responsible for connecting AI to our visual canvas where they can create artifacts in the board and collaborate with you like I talked about in the keynote. In this session, we'll go deeper and give a demo about how this actually works so you can see it in more detail and understand the things that you need to know to be able to do this yourself. If you were in the keynote, you heard Jeff talk about the shifts and the ways teams are working. Here's the reality. Every team represented here is already using AI in some way, shape, or form. Individuals in every company are finding the first workflows, the first techniques, the first prompts that they find value in. And because of this, individual output has gone up by a lot. An individual engineer can be much more productive. A designer can take an idea and turn it into a fully interactive prototype in minutes or hours instead of days or weeks. But as an organization, typically you're not moving faster, or at least not in the way that you expected. We commissioned Forrester to understand why. We talked to 518 product, business, and IT decision makers across many different companies and verticals. 75% of them said that AI tools focus too much on individual productivity, but don't have a good solution for teams. 43%, almost half of them, said that their current technology actually inhibits cross-functional collaboration. Not just that it fails to help, but it actually makes it worse. And at the same time, almost all of them, 82%, want AI solutions that help with this problem. So the gap is pretty clear. AI is working, but not for teams. I've experienced this myself. Teams will show up to a review with work mostly done, with dozens or hundreds of small decisions made on their own, solo, without talking to anyone else. And now their time saved is now lost. Because as they've gone on that journey, they haven't brought other people with them. The train of thought that led to that concept, all those decisions that were made along the way, are now invisible, locked away in a conversation in their terminal or their desktop app with Claude or ChatGPT. The problem is simple. Most AI tools do not offer a shared place where teams see the same thing, work in the same context, and where AI can act across it all together. It's not a technology problem, it's a space and UI problem, a limitation in the tools that we've created so far that make it hard for people to come together and work with agents. We believe deeply that the canvas is the right place to do this, that the canvas is where this becomes possible. And that's what this session is about. I'll give you the simplest way to think about AI workflows. Think about the best operator on your team, how they take messy inputs, structure through the problem, think about it, build a mental model that they can share. Think about how they move the team towards a decision, creating clarity as they go, taking that messy space and turning it into clear options that we can choose between. Right now, that process lives in their head, or increasingly in their conversations with an agent. When they leave the conversation, it leaves with them. We built AI workflows as a tool to unlock that as a team capability. There are two parts to this, as we discussed before, flows and sidekicks. Both are built for accelerating teams, not just individuals. First, flows. Flows are multi-step AI workflows that run visually on the canvas. You can take any input, chain steps together, and create a full output in minutes across many different formats. PRDs, roadmaps, interactive prototypes, tables, trackers, and timelines. And everything you create, every step in the flow, is visible to the entire team. So when something is created, you can bring people in to give feedback. When you've created a workflow that works, you can save it and share it with other people, making it repeatable. So this great way of working that you discovered to move the work forward becomes something that anyone on the team can do, no matter how comfortable they are or aren't with AI. Second, sidekicks. Sidekicks are conversational AI agents that know your team's context. They know about your processes, your terminology, and your data through AI customization, as we heard about in the keynote. You can build them, share them, and control their use across your organization. This also helps individual expertise become a shared benefit. If someone has built a sidekick that is useful for them, they can share it with other people so that other people can talk to it too and get that same value. Again, the theme is that an expert builder or someone who has figured out a workflow that works can share and repeat that process with people who don't have the expertise needed to build those tools, so you can share them with your entire team. For example, a sidekick that your lead tech architect builds to review pull requests or to review architectural decisions doesn't just stay with them, doesn't just stay as a skill that they have. This becomes something that everyone on the engineering team can use. If they find friction in the process of interacting with the agent, they can fix it, save it, update it, and push it out to their team. When the agents work, they create a visual trace, and they create artifacts that capture the decisions or the conversations that were had in this collaborative workspace. So the train of thought is in the canvas, and people can follow along. Now, this all gets more powerful when you connect it to the rest of your tools. This morning, we announced connectors. With connectors, flows and sidekicks don't just run in the canvas, not just in Miro, but they can reach into the tools that your team already uses. They can pull in context from Jira, Slack, Google Drive, GitHub, and many, many more, and help you take actions across those tools as well. For instance, you can gather the most up-to-date project information from Jira, you can draft a message, you can create a shareable artifact or presentation, and you can share it right to where your team communicates. We'll show this in a minute. It's not just reading data, it's updating tickets, it's posting summaries, it can even create pull requests, all as part of AI workflows. It's built right into Miro's UI, so anyone on the team can connect to their tools and use it. Instead of AI sitting off to the side in a chat window or a separate application, it becomes part of the team's collaborative workspace, where everyone can see the output, react together, and move forward with the feedback without having to switch between tools or copy and paste handoffs. Before I demo, I'd like to talk through how this works conceptually. On the left, we have inputs. This is all the data that your team already has. Frequently, it's split across many tools. Maybe you're talking about the project in Slack. There are Jira tickets for the work that's in flight. You've created data dashboards to show what's going on in the product right now. You've got transcripts across your meeting tools. All of these things can provide really rich input for AI to take action on. Typically, when you hit a limitation with AI, you'll find that that limitation is caused by it not having access to the right data it needs to do the job. In this way, it's a lot like working with a human collaborator. If they don't have the information that they need to do the job, they can't do a good job. Now, with connectors, you can pull that data to ground sidekicks and the information that they need. Connectors bring it all into the canvas, visualizing the inputs and putting structure around them for the team to align on what needs to happen next. Flows and sidekicks accelerate decision-making. All of your work becomes context for AI. This is what we heard as canvas as the prompt this morning. The idea that all of this collaborative workspace becomes a constantly updating bit of information that the AI can use to move the work forward. Flows create chains in the canvas that allow you to take that context and transform it into things that are useful. Sidekicks help you iterate on those outputs in a collaborative, conversational way where you can be more exploratory and pursue branching paths. And all this time, your team is working through it together in real time. That's the messy middle of doing knowledge work. On the right, you have outputs. Because connectors go both ways, those outputs don't need to stay in the canvas. When you've reached a decision or aligned on something together, those decisions and those artifacts can flow back into the other tools that you're using. In short, the canvas becomes where decisions and collaboration happen and where the work gets orchestrated from. Then the decisions and feedback can flow back into the other tools that your team uses. Connectors get the headline, but a few other important things changed. You can generate frames and board content, creating spaces for your team to collaborate. All the great stuff that you may know Miro for, stickies, collaboration, and workshops, are now just not only easier to create and prepare, but also can work as rich context for the next steps in an AI workflow. As you work, Sidekicks now remember your team's work and their preferences, so you're not starting from scratch every time. If there are spaces that the team uses to communicate, it will remember that, and it doesn't need to ask you about them again. So as you work with it more, it picks up more context on how you work, both as an individual and as a team, and gets easier to use. They can also help you break down more complex problems, planning with you, not just answering questions. Earlier, we showed how voice lowers the barrier, makes it easier to work with AI, especially when you're working through something more open-ended. And around all of this, you have deep admin controls, so you can manage how this rolls out across your teams, which models are available, which tools the team has access to, which connectors they can use, all to fit it to your organization's needs. So let me show you how this looks in practice. A real use case that we use in Miro, pulling inputs into the canvas, aligning quickly, and taking action. All right, so we'll do this a little bit like a cooking show, and I'll explain what's happening as I work through it. Let me kick this off now. Okay. So, like I mentioned before, for the AI to do good work, it needs to ground itself in the information and context in your organization. We use Miro for a lot of things, but we don't use it for everything in our organization. There's important context that lives elsewhere. We're talking about a big launch that's coming up in Australia, in Confluence. We're documenting decisions there. We've got the responsible engineers and all the different tracks in the work in flight. The most up-to-date information lives in Jira, where we're doing our task tracking, keeping track of the things that are happening across every team. The individual tickets, the bugs, the things that might block us for launch, all of these are living in Jira. But some of the richest information is in our team conversations in Slack. You can see that everyone has been talking for the last several weeks, sharing updates from all different projects, going deep into different threads. And all of this information, as we're going back and forth and talking about what's going on, as we're actually executing the work, is critical context, things that often don't get written down or recorded when people are in the flow of work. No matter how good your note-taking is, there is context in the everyday conversation and collaboration that will never get written down in a formal note-taking tool or system of record. All of this context can be critical to make sure that the AI knows what it needs to know about your organization and their work. As a product manager, I live in Slack. It's my to-do list for the day in many ways. It's where I manage communication with my team. And so that is context that I need at hand when I'm thinking about how to share updates with my stakeholders. While I've been talking, the flow has been running in the background. You can see that it pulled the information from Confluence about what's going on and mapped out a starting point to understand the timelines for the project across multiple tracks of work. In addition to that, it's going out to Slack. It's looking across all the different channels where we've been communicating. In the prompt, I told it about where we usually communicate, so it has reference to this, and it knows where that information lives. It can pull those threads and those conversations in the channels I give or anything else that I give access to, and it's able to summarize that as line items that pull out the most important points that I might need to incorporate in the plan. In this case, it's pulling from many different places, so it might take a minute for that to come together, but I prepared one in advance that you can see elsewhere in the canvas here. Once we have these updates across these different tools, it's still generating here, I can take those inputs or those outputs from AI that become inputs to the next step in the process. All of that information in the timeline, the information that will come in from Slack as soon as that's available, can be used to create board content, to create a visual project overview that takes all that information and aggregates it together. The outputs from the previous step of the process become inputs to the next stage. Again, this is a heavy operation, so while it thinks, I'll show you a version of this that I prepared before this presentation. And here you can see the power of this being laid out visually. It's also cross-referencing across all the context and information that I provided. So it's able to do things like find timeline contradictions and dependency mismatches. If we've talked about something in a Slack channel that doesn't match what's in our documentation, it can flag that and visualize that according to the instructions that I've created and the way that I want this information to be visualized in the canvas. In addition to this, it's gathering work across all the different tracks, and it's doing that in a collaborative space that we all can contribute to. So if we want to leave comments, add missing information that perhaps the AI missed, tweak it, iterate, and nudge, you can do all of that in a collaborative artifact right in the canvas. Not only that, there are spaces where you can gather confidence checks and lightweight check-ins with your team. People can engage with these asynchronously, and you can very quickly get a pulse from people who are engaging with this board asynchronously to understand what's going on and how people are feeling. Finally, it creates a space at the bottom for everyone to say what their number one priority is, a simple practice that helps ground people in thinking about what's most important. So the shared theme across all of this is gathering that information, putting it in the canvas and visualizing it, and putting it in a space where it's easy to provide feedback and additional information in a collaborative way. Still thinking today. But you can see the value and the power of seeing all these things side by side. But the flow isn't the end of the story. Once we've gathered all this stuff together, let's say that I want to have a synchronous meeting about it where I pull the whole team in together. We talk about a lot of valuable stuff live that now lives in a meeting transcript in Google Drive. And we've got a bunch of decisions and comments that were left all over this board in the canvas. From here, I can interact with my sidekick to take the next step. Prepared a prompt here. And if I start this conversation and say, I'll drop my prompt, I'd like to pull the launch readiness transcript from Google Drive, use the frame that we created together as context, you can see here it's selected, and draft a Slack message. Once you've prepared that message that I can share with my stakeholders, send it to the channel that we're using to collaborate and communicate progress on the team. To do this, I have to make sure it has access to the right information. I'm referring to a Google Drive transcript, and so I'll hook up the connector to Google Drive, and it's very easy. So let me look for Drive. I can connect it, and it will launch in another tab. I'll authorize it to add this context, and now Google Drive is connected. So all of that information from the conversation that the team had together is now available to the prompt that I've created. If I go ahead and hit run, I can start the conversation. And because sidekicks have become more agentic, they're going to be much better at tracking and thinking about multi-step work. I could open this up and see what it's doing. So it does some thinking. It goes out and retrieves which tools it has available in Slack, so it can find the right information. It accesses the Google Drive tools that give it access to the data. And it grabs a summary from the board to understand what the team has done and collaborated on together. Once it's gathered all of that context, it starts to plan. It's pulling out the most important information about the campaign, what we're doing to get ready, some of the math around due dates, things that might not get done on time, and identifying action owners based on the people who have been responsible for things in the team communication. Overall, this looks good, but I think this is a little bit too detailed for my audience. I'm thinking about posting to a company general channel where we maybe need to have a more executive summary, let's say. So it's easy to take this summary. Hey, this looks great, but could you summarize it to make it a little bit shorter? Maybe summarize it in an exec format and try to stick to 8 or 9 bullets. And with that feedback, it'll take everything that I just said, take that same context, and give me a punchier summary that is more appropriate to a general channel. So I'll say, that looks great. Please post back to the channel. It'll think on it for a moment, and because it has access to Slack, it'll ask me for permission to go back and share that detail, those details with my team. I'll decide to allow this once. I try to keep close track of what sidekicks are posting to Slack for me. Say, go ahead and do that. It'll think for a moment. And it looks like the Slack message already sent, so that's great. I'll go back to the team channel where we're communicating, and you can see here's the update that comes from all that information that we just gathered. So it's worth taking a step back here and talking about what just happened. We took rich information that lives across several tools, including our team's communication tools. We pulled that in as context for AI. We used that to create visual artifacts that summarize what's going on across a lot of different places. We created a visual roadmap that shows the timelines and the dates of things that will be done. We created a table that shows the information that is happening by topic across all of our different Slack channels. Then we pulled that all together into one collaborative canvas where everything is visualized. You can see it all mapped out. And the team can provide feedback and leave comments. Once we had this artifact and provided the input we needed, we had a live conversation where we recorded the transcript and used it as context on what the team is discussing. It was very easy to connect that context to the agent right alongside the Miro board and pull all of it together into an update to my stakeholders. This is the sort of work as a product manager that actually doesn't really provide that much value. It's not related to making the hard decisions, it's just communicating status and gathering information. Of course, there are choices about what we communicate and when, but it's easy to steer those by collaborating in the canvas and talking about what we think is most important and giving our sense of the priorities. All of those things are used as input to help me share something that used to take me an hour to put together and now I can do in minutes. And so all of that adds up to being able to very quickly create a high-value update that lets you know what's going on across all these teams, while focusing on the real work, collaboration, decision-making, and prioritization, not doing a bunch of manual synthesis of information that is available across several different tools. I'll go back to my presentation. Okay. That gives you a look at one simple flow that we built as a team together to get value. This is one of the most useful things that we're using every day, but there are many more examples, from customer research synthesis to visualizing code changes and talking about architecture, some of the other things that you heard about today, and some things that you can check out at the demo booths. But it's not just Miro. We're starting to hear great stories from our customers about how they're getting value from flows and sidekicks. Smart System Guild used flows to run a complex project for Freitag. Over 40 different workshops with different stakeholders. They did a very detailed process engineering, multiple RFPs, and were able to cut project time in half by making data analysis 80% faster. Hopefully now you have a sense of how that can work, that you can have conversations in Gong or in Google Meet or any other tool that you're using for conferencing, that all of those client conversations and communications can become context that's very easy to compress and synthesize and turn into a summary of the conversations that you had. So you can focus on the high-value conversation without worrying about taking notes. All of those things can happen in the background. Then that becomes things that are ready to share with clients and stakeholders very quickly. That allowed Miro to become Freitag's living documentation for the next phase. It's not a report that gets filed away and put in a folder somewhere. It's someplace where the team can keep coming in and providing feedback, annotating things on top, and iterating as they move forward. Endava has been using Miro for a shared context hub as well. They've been using blueprints to standardize processes for product discovery. The blueprints take custom sidekicks that are prompted to follow a certain script for discovery with their sales agents, gather all the information that's necessary to define a project opportunity to a potential customer, and turn it into a highly tailored proposal. This is a process that used to take days or weeks. Now they're speeding it up considerably, seeing 40% faster cycle times across the process. So these are two different teams in two different industries, and their use cases are different, but you can see the pattern. You connect to an outside tool, you gather rich and messy contextual information, you bring the team together into a space where they can collaborate and steer, and you create something that's useful to share and push back out to your system of record or your next customer touchpoint. This works best when it's embedded into how teams actually work, not just added on top as a tool. Miro has always been a place where teams come together and define messy work, but now that can be codified and distributed to teams when people find something that works. So what can you actually do with this? Where can you start when you head back to your desk, or if you're going over to the demo booths later, when you sit down maybe to make your first flow or have your first conversation with the sidekick? It's often useful to start with where context is getting lost. Where is your team copying and pasting things between tools or waiting on handoffs? Where is the information that you think would be valuable to ground the agent's activities? If you're building a project plan, connect it to your systems of record for the ongoing work. If you're synthesizing research, think about where those conversations live and how you can connect them. Pick one high-impact flow, especially if there's a lot of manual work that has to do with summarizing or synthesizing information. Ideally, something that's repetitive and painful enough to matter. Again, a small example, but writing my weekly product update as a PM is an hour or two that I could spend in much better ways, talking to customers, working with the team to understand a complex problem. And removing that hour or two from my week really adds up as I add up the workflows that I'm starting to figure out how to scale, not just for my work, but across my teams. Connect it to your stack. Hook it up to the tools that you need to use so that those decisions can also flow back into them. Not just using them as context sources, but thinking about how the decisions can be recorded and turned into the valuable next steps to move the work forward. Then make it repeatable. Think about how to distribute that. You can save it as a flow. You can share that board with others. If you find a sidekick that's useful, you can share it with your team and make it a part of your standard process. You don't need to transform everything. For many people, the moment where they get it comes from seeing a difficult problem that took a lot of time to solve before, solved quickly. So when you think about transformation, It's often those everyday small things that help people start to get traction with figuring out how to use AI in a repeatable way. Today, you can do 3 things. You can visit our demo booths. If you want to explore this, you can talk to me or the team here. We're happy to walk you through and think about how we could build a flow or a sidekick together to solve a specific problem that you have. We have a webinar upcoming. You can register for that and get more information from everyone here on how to do that. And that will be a chance for your team to go deeper if they would like. Finally, you can talk to your account team. They can provide advice and work with you to see whether a trial of AI workflows is something that would be a valuable next step for you to try out some of these features. Thank you so much.